Is it time to press the panic button yet for the Cincinnati Bearcats in conference realignment?
Our Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day, or in this case, your second listen. This is an emergency bonus podcast, and I am joined today by the host of Locked On Big 12, Josh Neighbors. I'm, of course, Alex Frank, your host of Locked On Bearcats each and every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts. And on YouTube, the Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. We're up to 307 and counting, so keep those subscribers coming. Follow us to get an alert every time we drop a new episode. Josh Neighbors, the Locked On Big 12 host, joining me today. And Josh, thank you, first off, for coming on what is an emergency bonus podcast, because there is so much happening right now with conference realignment. And I'm just going to ask you, because these are the two questions I think Bearcats fans want to know the answers to the most. Where do the Bearcats in the Big 12 stand right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're fine, right? I think they're going to be in a fine position right now. I think it's totally cool. I think they're in a spot where nothing's going to happen to them. I don't think they'd be too worried. I know some people have shared concerns about that, but I really am not too worried about their position right now in the Big 12. I fully expect those four new schools to come in and assimilate in. I know that there's been some talk about, hey, well, would the four Pac-12 schools, or potentially even six Pac-12 schools that would be coming into the Big 12, would they be upset that there's four new schools coming in, more people to share the pie with? But no, I think it's a situation where you're kind of at a more the merrier type point for the Big 12. You know, the more teams, the stronger your position, the more you kind of solidify yourself. Obviously, performance is a big thing, but no, I would not be too concerned if I was Cincinnati. Sure, whenever you see teams move around, whenever you see, the big guns get even bigger with Big Ten and with SEC, there's going to be some concern, sure, but I'm not too worried if I'm a Cincinnati Bearcats fan.
Okay, so what are you hearing about the Big 12? Because I've been reading stuff this week that they may go after four teams that are in the Pac-12: Utah, Colorado, Arizona State being mentioned. I've also seen Oregon and Washington. So what are you hearing, Josh, about the Big 12? What schools could they target?
Yeah, so the conversation this week was around four schools. It was reported at multiple outlets, but the four schools really off the top of the head was Colorado, the two Arizona schools, Arizona and Arizona State, as well as Utah. Now, there was some talk about Washington and Oregon as well, but I think, it might be a bit of a waiting game for those two schools. Like, a few factors here. One, Notre Dame. It seems like that would be the Big Ten's next target, would be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, to see if they could give up their independence to join the Big Ten conference, and then maybe they'd go from there to add more schools. Oregon and Washington also might be waiting on what's happening right now with their television negotiation, the Pac-12. They just opened it up a little bit earlier than we thought they would. So George Kliavkoff is exploring those television options now. 30-day window for ESPN and Fox to make initial offers, and then they can go outside of that. I do not think Fox would be very interested, most likely because you'd assume that they just help solicit that move for USC and UCLA to the Big Ten, which obviously they are aligned with from a television standpoint, at least right now. We expect that partnership to most likely continue past, moving forward. We'll see what their television deal ends up being. And so, we'll see what ESPN offers. Maybe they go outside that 30-day window and see what they can get from other places, such as an Amazon Prime, such as a Paramount Plus, CBS, those places, Hulu, all of those places might be interested in offering something to Pac-12, but I'm kind of wondering what the appetite will be. So I think it's in the best interest of the Big 12 conference to be aggressive and to explore if they could get Oregon and Washington into the conference, because those are the biggest two gets they could, reasonably right now. It feels like Oregon and Wisconsin are the two best gets right now the conference could have.
So let me ask you this. Do you fear that the Big 12 could be left on the outside of this conference realignment that is, I think, only just beginning?
Yeah, I'm sure there is some fears here with that. I mean, I think everybody's afraid, but I think they're less afraid than they were before. I mean, you had to think that, we were having conversations before this about, hey, is the Big 12 still a Power 5 league? That was a big talking point. And now there are talks about, could the Big 12 become one of the biggest 3 leagues? Will they have an opportunity to do that? Obviously, ACC is locked in with a pretty lucrative contract. I know there were talks about an ACC Pac-12 loose partnership, but I'm not really sure what good that does for the ACC and what good it does, for ESPN. ESPN has a fantastic television partnership in their eyes with the ACC. They're getting Florida State. They're getting Clemson. They are getting Miami. They're getting Virginia Tech. They're getting all of those schools. They're getting Duke and Carolina, and they're getting them for a really good price in the market. Now, those schools might want to break free of that, but it would take a move from an outside place to go and do it. So obviously the ACC is kind of there almost in a state of limbo. I think we know all the teams that are there would like to leave, but they can't leave due to how long the contract is unless they want to go to court. And I'm sure they might do that. So there is some talk about, okay, what happens there? But I don't think the ACC is kind of being held up by a bad television deal, to be honest. Like it's almost worked in their favor. The deal is so good for ESPN. They have no reason to break that thing up. And think about it this way. Why would ESPN want to break up the ACC and a conference they have exclusive rights for right now on a really good deal, and then send those teams to another conference, which they already have exclusive rights for, then jack up the price of that conference? That doesn't make much sense for me from a business perspective. So I think the Big 12 here is in the catbird seat of the non-SEC, non-Big 10 conferences to be a mover and shaker. I think they're out of the Pac-12, out of the ACC, and out of the Big 12, I would lean towards the Big 12 right now and be able to get more things done and add more teams. I don't see an Oregon and Washington wanting to join an ACC right now. So that's why I think the Big 12 is kind of in the catbird seat, especially if the Big 10 takes a step back and kind of puts on some patience right now.
So let me ask you this. So you're saying that you think the Big 12, because I've seen the expression, is going to play some offense in this round of conference realignment. So you're expecting the Big 12 to go out and recruit these schools from the Pac-12, maybe the ACC, to come into their conference so they don't get left out on the outside and that they could be a part of a Big 3, which, I mean, we could be heading there, Josh.
Yeah, it feels like that's what we're, a Big 2 for sure. The question is who else comes in and makes it a Big 3, I think right now, which is really sad. I don't like having this conversation. And there's also conversations about, hey, will conferences be kicking out teams? But look, the Big 12 is in no position to have that kind of talk right now. I think it's all about being the aggressive team. Obviously, Brett Yormark is going to step in here pretty soon. There's conversations about, hey, who is going to be taking the podium next week? I'd assume it's Brett Yormark. I know he has not officially begun yet, but why would you have Bob Bowlesby go out there? Why would you have him be involved at all in anything involving what the conference's future looks like, especially from a television contract standpoint? So to me, right now, this is the Big 12's time to be aggressive and see if they can grow and really become, not an island of misfit toys, but like for a lot of the schools that felt like they might be left out, there's some really good brands that they're going to get there, but they could be a place, kind of a safe harbor for those schools, and then, see what happens from there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what a time for Brett Yormark to step right in. Here you go. Conference realignment is picking up steam like we've never seen it before. Josh, I want to ask you after a word from Bet Online about the ACC's television deal with ESPN, because there is one game in particular that if ESPN were to lose, it would be a gigantic loss, and it's on the hardwood. I'll ask you that question after a word from betonline.net, your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, which already concluded, and Major League Baseball, which there really aren't a lot of great division races in that sport right now. There is one, though. That's the NL East. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And betonline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so two things I want to make clear before we continue the conversation. I'm Alex Frank, host of Locked On Bearcats. Josh Neighbors, Locked On Big 12. My guest, two things I'm making clear. One is I had taken off from recording June 24th, Friday, June 24th. And I didn't feel great about that decision after the fact. So this is to make up for that day. So that's why we're getting the sponsors in from that day today. And this is not, you see this hat says Miami. This is not, Josh, and for anybody watching, this is not Miami, Ohio. I do not wear anything associated with that school. This is a Miami South Beach hat. And you can see the script writing right here, South Beach. So there you go. If you were worried I was representing Miami, Ohio, absolutely not. And when do I ever represent a school that Ben Roethlisberger went to? Anyway, Josh Neighbors, Locked On Big 12, my guest today here on Locked On Bearcats. So, Josh, you mentioned the ACC and their television deal with ESPN. That, there was a rumor that went out yesterday. Not a rumor. There was a tweet that was out yesterday. Brandon Keith of SwimStream saying that the ACC is working to avoid its television deal with ESPN. That means if the four schools that were mentioned go to the SEC, North Carolina, Virginia, Florida State, and Clemson, one school is not mentioned, Duke. Josh, what would happen to ESPN if they lost Carolina Duke in the ACC?
Oh, this report is what I was referencing before when there was talk about those four schools going. This makes no sense. This report, I mean, just think about it logically. Once again, ESPN is the exclusive rights holder for both the ACC and the SEC. The deal they have right now is that they are paying $240 million over the next 20 years. Well, it was from 2016 to 2036. So 16 more years left on this deal. 14, whatever it is now, 14, 15, whatever, bad at math. But they're paying out about $17 million per year to the ACC. Why would they let Virginia, Clemson, FSU, and Miami out of that deal and then let them go elsewhere to drive up the price of another deal they already have? It would not make a whole lot of sense for the television company to do that. They've got Clemson under wraps, which is a really good brand. They've got Florida State and Miami under wraps. The only way it makes a lot of sense is if they give it over to, if it goes to the SEC and it jacks up that television deal to the, or it basically, like, the numbers have to add up is what I'm saying here. The numbers have to add up for them to make it a financially, strong move. And really what would happen is they probably end up having to pay out more money to those schools than they are right now. So I don't think they're in any rush to have Clemson and FSU and Miami in the SEC unless it makes financial sense for them. Also, how could those schools negotiate their own way out? The only way they get to get out is if somebody comes to them and asks them to leave. That's the way they want it. That's the way, that's the way OU and Texas say that, hey, they were the ones who made the move. No, the SEC came to them, and that's how that got facilitated. So, it would be really sad if Duke and Carolina got broken up. I don't think they will. I think a good, likely scenario is for both of them to go to maybe the Big Ten down the road, but I don't believe that reporting for a second about what's happening, with those teams negotiating their way out or ESPN voiding the contract. Why are you going to avoid a good deal that's good for you, where you still get to keep Clemson, Miami, and FSU under your exclusive thumbprint right now?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, if those schools leave the ACC, which to me is a well-established conference, especially in college basketball. So I'm just fearing if those schools leave, where is the competitive balance in college sports if it still even exists?
It would be in the SEC. Well, for basketball, it'd still kind of be all over the place, right? Like, the SEC would be adding good leagues. The Big 12 would still have a bunch of really good basketball schools. The Big 10 have a lot of good, their tournament success, though, has not been very good recently. So, I think basketball will be everywhere. The power concentration is already heading to the Big 2. That's where it's heading now. I just think that it's just kind of a matter of where the rest of the dominoes fall. That's why it's important for the Big 12. If they could snag two brands like Oregon and Washington, you could basically lock up Nike's, college football brand, which is Oregon. You can lock up the Seattle market, which is Washington. And those are both very good brands to have. That's why you do it, because you actually come to the table with something to offer, and also a lot of really good teams. If they're going to expand a super league, type situation to like 60 teams, kind of puts you in a good position to at least have a conversation about that. So balance is heading to the Big 2. We already knew that, though. Just a matter of can the Big 12 kind of, find a way to complement them well, I guess.
So you think that we could be heading to a situation, I don't know when, but you think we are heading to where we have 2 super conferences, maybe 3. How many teams would be in those conferences? 24?
Yeah, I think it's not out of the realm of possibility to go 24, probably. Yeah. I think it's heading that way. And the one interesting wrinkle that we kind of put aside now is college football playoff expansion, right? Like that is the one thing we've actually set to the side, because right now we are not sure which conference is going to look like what, but we've got 3 years really to figure out what's going to happen. I mean, if we kept the system the way it is and you go with the top 4, which, honestly might be the most status quo move ever, it'd be really interesting. There'd still be a lot of cannibalization. You'd be conversations, maybe could a conference get like 3 teams in? I think is something we'd start talking about, which I doubt would happen. But if we went to a 12-team model where there's auto bids, like which conferences are getting the automatic bids at that point in time? How do you structure it? Is it just the top 12 ranked teams? Because if you did that, you'd have a lot of, it's going to end up being a whole lot of schools from the 2 power conferences. So there are some big, that's kind of the next thing I'm looking at right here is, all right, what does that look like? Because all the moves might not be done by 2025 in terms of conference realignment, but we know where this is heading. So how does that get reflected on the college football playoff contract they're moving forward? That's a big question here, but it's going to be probably a Super 2 situation. It does feel very much like the Champions League in soccer. For those of you who are not familiar, the Champions League takes the 4 best teams from from the top leagues, I should say. So England will get 4 teams in, France and Spain and Germany will all place 4 teams in the Champions League. And then your Switzerland, the winner of the Swiss League, will get in. And, maybe your Belgium will put the 2 best teams from their league. Scotland will put their league winner. So what you're hearing here is, okay, the big countries are putting in 4 teams into this Champions League, right? The smaller countries are putting 2 or 1 team in this Champions League. And there's even a bunch of small countries, like Moldova's champion gets to play in a playoff to get their way in. I think that is probably what we're heading towards if we're talking about a college football playoff or even a Super League type situation. England can be your Pac-10 or your Big Ten. Spain can be your SEC if you want. I'm just throwing that out there. And then, maybe the Big 12 is your France and the Pac-12 is your Belgium and so on and so forth.
I'm just really starting to think about how these conference tournaments in basketball are going to work if you have 24-team leagues. I mean, that's going to be like a mini NCAA tournament. I mean, where in the world, we're heading to and what it's going to do for things like that conference tournament. And not only that, but if we go to, where we have 2 super conferences, hopefully 3 with the Big 12, I mean, what happens to the ACC and the Pac-12? And then on the other hand, what happens to schools like Ball State and Central Michigan, who aren't even in discussions for conference realignment, it feels like? And what happens to schools like Memphis and SMU, schools who should be considered for realignment, who are not? We'll get into that next, Josh, after a word from Rock Auto. That's what this episode is brought to you by. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for you to go to your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why do you want to endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? Well, you with computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket, you can save time and money when using Rock Auto. It's a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you can need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On and their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Josh Neighbors, Locked On Big 12, hopefully a Super 3 conference. If that's the language we have to use right now, I won't mind it. And by the way, the schools you mentioned from the Pac-12, that the Big 12 could target and I think should target, all in. Seriously. I mean, I'm just thinking about road trips to Utah, to the West Coast, the Rocky Mountains. I mean, sign me up for that as a Cincinnati Bearcats fan, alum, and Cincinnatian in general. But I have to ask you this. If we go to a Super 3, what happens to the ACC and the Pac-12? I mean, we are essentially altering history with this conference realignment in terms of college athletics. We're getting rid of the ACC, which has been a basketball empire, so to speak. We're getting rid of the Pac-12, which, I mean, you know, they have a lot of history. UCLA,
it's been around
USC,
since like the 1920s, I think, the Pacific Coast Conference. It's been around forever, man.
It's been around a while. You've got a lot of great programs out there. I know people love to rip on it for their lack of success in the college football playoff era and maybe lack of basketball success, but still, I mean, they brand themselves as the Conference of Champions. What happens to those? What happens to those schools, Josh? Like, what happens in those conferences if we go to a Super 3 conference format?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'd go away. Like, they need an infrastructure to support themselves, right? And maybe they team up and get together. I mean, look, maybe the Big 12's in that spot too. Maybe we're being too short-sighted, about this. It's all on the table at this point, right? It's really all on the table. So I don't have a good answer for that. I really don't. I mean, like, besides them just going away, which is a really crappy thing to think. It's not a fun thing. I don't say it with any pleasure at all, but I think that's the reality, Alex.
So then what happens? Well, then if you're saying the Big 12 is going to go away potentially, which we hope it doesn't, and I don't think it will, but what happens to schools like, Washington State? What happens to Cal? What happens to Syracuse? What happens? I mean, these are big-time programs that I'm rattling off, Josh, and we're just going to say, well, you don't have a conference to play in. Where do they go?
I mean, wow. Where do they go? Like, what do they do? Where do they play? Yeah, I mean, that's something we have to ask.
Maybe Phil Castellini has an answer to that question. Where are you going to go? I mean, maybe the Reds, I mean, not to rip on the Reds owner or anything, which I know people love to do, or the Reds chief operating officer, whatever his title is. Anyway, so, and then I'm thinking about, like, I feel bad for schools today like Ball State, Central Michigan, Florida International, Rice. Schools who aren't even being mentioned in conference realignment. Those schools don't even know what conference realignment is, potentially. Where do they go?
So, I mean, those schools have kind of already been left out in a way, right? They're kind of already at the altar as it is. So I don't really know, I mean, they're kind of already left out, like, as it is. I think they'd almost kind of get maybe sucked into the FCS level, right? I mean, maybe go down just a bit. But, like, here's the thing is, people care about FCS football because their schools, their schools, they went there. So people do care about that stuff. And that's kind of the big question is, like, but here's the thing, can they financially support a football team is a huge question. Will these schools even be able to do that stuff anymore? I mean, it's a huge, it's a huge question that we're going to have to answer. I think some of them will, but I really don't. I mean, it's tough to think about what happens to those smaller leagues. I know they all have TV contracts because people care and want to watch them, but they're not nearly worth as much as these other ones are. So that is something to watch, definitely, for sure. You're spot on.
I mean, we're talking about the ACC and the Pac-12 going away. I mean, what's going to happen to conferences like Conference USA and the Mid-American and schools like and conferences like that? And then I think about a school like Gonzaga, who has an unbelievable basketball program. They're in the West Coast Conference. I know they don't have football, which I think every Power 5 school that has college basketball has football, as far as I'm concerned. And what's going to happen to them? Should the Big 12 reach out to them and say, hey, we think you are a great program. Come to the best conference in college basketball. Like, can they do that? Does Gonzaga need a football program? I mean, what are the logistics there?
I mean, I think Gonzaga's a really interesting case in all of this, but I think somebody scoops them up because, look, they're starting to put guys. I mean, they've put 2 guys in the NBA in the top, 3 or 4 picks last couple of years, Jalen Suggs and then Chet Holmgren. So once you start doing that and you're putting guys on TV that people want to watch play, and they're in the NCAA tournament every single year. I mean, they almost won a title if it weren't for Baylor like, I think that they're going to be okay on the basketball front. College basketball is still a very, very large industry. And the one thing that's really valuable about it is that it fills up a lot of television time during the winter months. I mean, from late November all the way through the end of March into April, people really do care about it. And it fills up so much television programming. Yeah. Think about how much basketball is on a college basketball Saturday because of how many Division I teams there are, and across conferences. So still a valuable asset, still a valuable product. And I think because of that, people are going to watch. I mean, Gonzaga's on ESPN basically every single night, and they're, every single time they play. And I mean, they're playing like Portland, right? So I think that there is a desire to have them in a conference where they be playing other teams, and the travel is going to be a pain in the butt. But yeah, I think they're going to be okay, and maybe they end up being like an independent basketball team. Maybe they do the. I mean, which I don't. I'm not sure it's happened. I'm sure it's happened at some point, but maybe they're an independent basketball team that goes and plays. Half Big 10 schedule, a half Big 12 schedule, or a third SEC. Maybe they do kind of they break it up with the conferences because people want to watch Gonzaga basketball on TV. I think that's something that's possible. But I mean, the same question could be asked for, what happens to maybe they join the Big East, right? The Big East is a basketball only league. We don't talk about Big East football, at all. So maybe that's an avenue that they could. So I don't think Gonzaga basketball should be too worried, especially if they keep pumping things out the way they do.
Yeah, but I mean, get him in a conference like the Big 12, especially if Oregon and Washington join and all these other Pac-12 schools. I mean, the travel wouldn't be that. You had Gonzaga, and the Big 10 can't even say that they have the best conference in college basketball. I mean,
they don't as it is now. But yes, no. I agree with that.
And there's another school. I mentioned this today on Locked On Bearcats that I think the Big 12 should target. No one's even mentioned it. Louisville.
Yeah, so I've seen Louisville. There's some interest in that. I mean, like how strong is that brand? How good is that for football? Really, how valuable is Louisville? I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I think it's an interesting question, but I don't know how much value they bring to the. I mean, look, it's a good location to be at for the Big 12. It's a great basketball brand, but I'm not sure how much value it's bringing to you also from a football standpoint.
Great basketball brand, bless you. Great basketball program, great baseball program. Geographically, it makes sense because then you have another team in the eastern part of the Big 12, as it is going to be next year. You got Cincinnati, Louisville, West Virginia. The Cincinnati-Louisville rivalry is a great one, the keg of nails when that was around. And Louisville is also a good market to have as far as television is concerned. You got a passionate fan base. I just think it makes a lot of sense if the Big 12 wants to go that route. And it remains to be seen what the ACC is doing. But I just think UCLA and USC going to the Big 10 is so massive in terms of the seismic shift in geography. It's massive in terms of these. I mean, the fact that these two brands are going to the Big 10. I mean, that's just the amount of movement that this is going to cause is unreal.
Yeah, the fallout is going to keep happening. It's going to be a protracted period of time, it feels like.
And then I think about the final thought, Josh, schools like Memphis and SMU, where are they going? Because those are solid programs. And I'm not sure why the Big 12 didn't target them.
Well, I think the four they picked make a lot of sense. They've got TCU already in Dallas-Fort Worth. I just don't know how much Memphis football is worth right now. They've renovated that stadium and stuff, but it's a good recruiting. It's a fertile recruiting ground for sure. It's just not really a excellent television market. I mean, here you're adding a great football program, a storied basketball program in Cincinnati. You're adding Florida and Orlando with UCF and a gigantic alumni base. BYU, you're adding that entire fan base and what they bring in, the second biggest independent out there. It's also got the religious attachment, which is huge. And then you bring in Houston, which is in the fourth largest television market. So no disrespect to SMU or to Memphis, but I think those four choices do make a lot of sense. And also, especially Cincinnati providing that kind of partner for West Virginia in that area of the country makes a lot of sense to me too. So Memphis for basketball, sure. But that's a rocky road, with what's going on with Penny Hardaway too. So, I think right now they pick kind of the safest options, but hey, maybe those are schools the Pac-12 reaches out to.
I mean, talk about the names of these conferences, Pac-12. Well, if you target a school like Memphis, you're not really a Pacific Athletic Conference, whatever that is. And just a side note, like I've talked extensively this week about road trips to Provo, Utah, and the unique elements that come with that. Like, I can't wait to experience that, like to go to a game at BYU. When we talk about college football, yeah, you got your blue bloods. They actually wear red uniforms. But when you think of college football, BYU is in that, synonymous conversation, Josh. I feel like that is the case. Do you?
Yeah, no, BYU is a really big brand. It's a huge brand. And I mean, they have real estate. They in Utah, like, own the state. That's why it'd be great to have Utah in there. I mean, you bring the Holy War within the conference would be fantastic. It's a really strong brand.
Can you imagine the rivalry oh man.
Right.
Someone told me recently that we need more rivalries in college football. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing a lot of rivalries get broken up. It would be great to kind of bring one together within, they still play the Holy War outside of the conference every single year. Or there was a time when it was a little bit of time it was off, but I mean, bringing that thing in conference would be fantastic.
And then you know what you do? If the ACC gets dissolved, just bring all the basketball conferences or schools back to the Big East and bring back Syracuse and Georgetown and bring back Syracuse and UConn and bring all those rivalries back.
Fantastic. Yeah,
you know what? Maybe this conference realignment is we're going to blend the old with the new, and I'd be all in.
I agree.
Josh Neighbors, Locked On Big 12, my guest today. Josh, thank you so much as always for your time. Emergency bonus podcast, but thank you for always your insightful analysis on the Big 12, the future home of the Cincinnati Bearcats, as of now, a Power 5 conference. But, by the time this show ends, it may not be. Josh Neighbors, thank you. Locked On Big 12, Locked On Nationals. You can listen to him on the Locked On Podcast Network. Josh, thank you as always, and best wishes to you, and I'm sure we'll talk again during football season.
Thanks, man.
Josh Neighbors, Locked On Big 12. So, you think I want Louisville to join the Big 12? Just you wait. I got another school up my sleeve. And this one, if the Big 12 is able to land this school, college basketball season is going to be fun. It's going to be already, though. That's going to do it for me. I said that was going to do it for me on the first show today. But that's going to do it for me this week here on Locked On Bearcats. Monday, the school that I want Cincinnati the school that I want the Big 12 to target in addition to Louisville. Or maybe, you know what? In addition to Louisville. Let's get them in too. So Utah, Colorado, Arizona State, Louisville, and this school. If we get this school in the Big 12, woo, man, get ready for some fun and some barking. Anyway, thank you for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. Now go make your second listen, Locked On Big 12. The man you just heard from, Josh Neighbors, takes you around the league in 30 minutes with the local experts from around the league. Locked On Big 12. Make that your second listen. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter at Frankie_90 with 2 N's, NNATI. You can follow me on Instagram, AlexFrank9_, or email me at alex3frank@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel, up to 307 subscribers and counting. You can also like and share a comment on today's video. Conference realignment discussion continuing next week. I also am going to dive into the Bearcats having the best odds to win the American Athletic Conference Championship. You remember how I said you can take that bet to Vegas and win, baby? Well, guess what? You can, because I'm telling you, you can. And then, starting on Thursday, so I got this topic from a colleague of the college channel of the Locked On Podcast Network. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back through every game of 2021, what we thought about before the game, what we thought during the game, what we thought after the game about the Cincinnati Bearcats football team last year. I wish this podcast was around this. This is kind of an opportunity for me to make it seem as if it was. It was around during the college football playoff. Then again, I was recording from the balcony of a cruise ship. That was fun. Anyway, that's going to be on the show next week. But thank you for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, whatever you do, so you can make Locked On Bearcats your first listen on Monday. That's when I'll be back. I'm Alex Frank for the Locked On Bearcats podcast. Have a great rest of your day.